Hey everyone, this is going to be a quick little overview of the Ottoman Empire and basically their response to the age of the Industrial Revolution. We are going to be looking at how other places around the world respond to what's been happening in Europe, specifically Great Britain, but as we've looked at already, what's happened in the United States. We see that Russia's industrializing, and so we're going to see how the rest of the world responds. Something to understand for the historical context is that we need to understand that people are moving towards industry, where machines and modernization is happening, which then by a byproduct of that is they need resources to make the goods. And so as we'll discuss later, we're going to see that they are looking for natural resources. As we look at cars, they're going to need rubber to make the tires for cars, so they need to find a place that has rubber trees so that they can get that. They also will then need markets to sell their goods to. And so all of this is very driven by the idea of nationalism. And so that's important for us to kind of really set the scene, set the historical context to understand what's going on in the Ottoman Empire. So that's where we're going to look at. How do they respond to this process? So first of all, when we said nationalism just a second ago, you need to understand that that basically means that there's loyalty or devotion to a nation or a nation state. This also comes along with the idea that one nation, we exalt one nation above all others, and placing the emphasis on promoting our own culture and the interest as opposed to other nations. So like the idea of like extreme nationalism, which we'll get into next unit with period 6 when we're talking about World War I, we're going to see that nationalism is like your country's the most important country and you're the best country. And so but at this time, we start seeing that people are devoted to their own nation, and that nation is really made up of some commonalities. So, for example, maybe we have a common language, a common ethnic group, we have common borders. Like, we have a really actually like a common story. And so when we're looking at this, you have to think of that, this common story, these common people. We're all the same, and we believe we have a loyalty to our sameness. And so nationalism is going to be a movement that we also kind of want to keep in our rearview mirror as we're discussing this unit. So let's just kind of zoom back into the Ottomans as we look at the world of where they're at. And so when we're looking at the Ottoman Empire, let's try to just quickly review things that we've talked about before. We've talked about how in 1453 that they conquered Istanbul, used to be Constantinople, and then kind of encroached on the European areas. They were an Islamic empire. They were a gunpowder empire. We talked about their founder being Osman Bey, and we talked about Mehmed the Conqueror, who, again, conquered Constantinople, turned it into Istanbul. Suleiman the Magnificent. We talked about the Devshirme system, if this is all coming back to you, when they would basically find young Christian boys from the Balkans and essentially have them via a system of slavery, and then they would kind of be sent to work in the bureaucracy within their government of the Ottomans, or maybe they'll be sent towards the route to work with the Janissaries, their military. And then we see that the leader of this is a sultan who kind of traces their roots back to the original caliphs. So something that you need to know, again, as we just kind of review the Ottomans from where we talked about last time, they're multi-ethnic, multilinguistic, multi-religious. So we see that they're Turkish, they're also Arabic, so again, different language groups. We also see multiple different religions that are within the Ottoman Empire. Many people who are Muslim. We have people who are Jewish. We also have people who are Christian within that area. Remember when we looked at that map, that this is like modern day Israel and Jerusalem, all is within the Ottoman Empire. So there starts to be some reasons for the decline of the empire. Oftentimes the Ottoman Empire is known as, quote, the sick man of Europe, as in they just kind of really to the same extent of what other countries are industrializing. They're kind of the one that's left behind. They are very connected to Europe, but they're not. They're kind of more in the Middle East. And so we start seeing these reasons, some evidence of them being, quote, the sick man of Europe. One, they're not industrialized, and so now they're competing with industry not that far from home in Europe. Two, they're having some financial issues. They're having a hard time developing a revenue. We talked before that they used to kind of be on the Silk Road network, and then people would come through, they could tax them. But now that things are more sea-based, this is going to be proving pretty difficult, and it's going to cause them to have less money. When you have less money in, it's hard to run your government programs, so that's going to be an issue. They're also going to start losing territory, and a lot of this kind of goes with people that decide they want their own nation, as we talked about nationalism before, and they feel like they have a different ethnic group or a different nation than this kind of multi-ethnic Ottoman Empire. The Janissaries start losing their military edge. They once were an elite fighting machine, and now, with industrialization, we see the modernization of weaponry. We get into the Maxim machine gun, and we'll talk more about that later. But basically, the Ottomans are in this rough spot. There's a major technology and military gap from them to those in Europe, and so they're starting to become less and less powerful, not the elite people that conquered Constantinople, and people were worried about how much they would encroach on Europe. So if you look at this map, you can kind of see the different areas of the Ottoman Empire. We see that by 1914, the beginning of World War I, the Ottoman Empire really was like Turkey, kind of the old Mesopotamian area. We see them going down into the Holy Land, into Mecca, into modern-day Yemen, and along the Persian Gulf. And that kind of was their empire. But it used to be all these other areas. So if you kind of look, they lost the Crimea, which we talk about later in the course, being kind of left to Russia as they needed a seaport, and so they lost that part. They eventually also lost our reddish areas here, Bosnia, Romania, and as we look into the purple areas, eventually Egypt asserts their independence, although they were very tied also to the British, and we'll talk again more about that later. But we start seeing these different areas gain their independence from the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottoman Empire continue to losing territory all the way up to when we lead to World War I in the next period. So how do they modernize? So let's look at some of the reforms that the Ottomans did to try to keep up and not fall terribly behind the Europeans. Well, the first early Ottoman reforms are going to be led by Sultan Selim III, and he's going to move the Ottoman Empire towards industry. He's going to use European loans, which loans are always a tricky thing because they come with interest, and that's going to pose a problem later on. But he gets the loans because it's expensive to start industrializing, and there's going to be some new law codes that they have in the Ottoman Empire. One of the major things to note is that it's going to focus less on Sharia law, or the Islamic law. And so this is going to make a few people mad. It's going to make, obviously, the Janissaries mad when they're trying to modernize kind of their elite fighting force that they feel like should keep with tradition, which is always tricky when we're talking about military. The ulama, or the scholars, the Muslim scholars. And ultimately, it didn't end well for Selim. He was overthrown and killed in 1807. But we start seeing that they're trying to figure out how they can move forward in this era. What happens also, then we have another guy, Sultan Mahmud II, and he's like, all right, we're going to tackle really modernizing the military, which sounds like maybe if we have a stronger military, we can be a stronger force. So he works on that. He wants to use European weaponry, though, and he wants to kind of have a stronger military force. This is going to have some eerie comparisons to what we're going to see in Japan with the samurai as well. But basically, he wants to modernize, and he wants it to be more European. So much so that he eliminates the Janissaries. For real. There's kind of this auspicious incident that is basically where he massacres the Janissaries. He slaughtered them without any mercy, brought them out, and then we see that when essentially one day they eliminate 500 years of this elite group of people, the Janissaries, by this. And so we see it's a major turning point in Ottoman history as they eliminate the Janissaries in this idea that we need to modernize our weaponry and become more like the Europeans. And so things take a turn, and we have some different groups that kind of emerge from these two different incidences. First of all, you have to kind of know these three different kind of reform movements or actions that take place. One of them is known as the Tanzimat reforms. The Tanzimat reforms literally means reorganization. They want to get rid of capitulations, which is basically if you are a European or a Westerner, that you, if you went to the Ottoman Empire, were exempt from different Ottoman laws. And so you could go there, maybe you didn't have to follow the law, or what, like the legal standing, or whatever the laws would be of the land. Or maybe you'd have tax exemptions. Well, this is kind of a big deal if you could go there and do business and not have to pay their taxes. And so they want to get rid of this. So the Tanzimat reforms are like, we're going to get rid of these special privileges for Europeans. Some of this is based on the fact that as they move to industry, they're based on these European loans. They're having to pay interest, and they start gathering kind of in this kind of blackmail-like situation where Europeans could do what they want because the Ottomans owed them a lot of interest for these loans. And so it's getting tricky. Also in the Tanzimat reforms, they start knowing that as they're diverse, and we have lots of different ethnic groups, they gave non-Muslims equal rights, which again was going to anger some people. And so we kind of have two different groups that emerge out of this. People that are going to lean a little more Turkish and secular, and people who are going to lean towards modernization but sticking with their true Muslim roots. And so we have these two groups. The first group will be, as we see in the next slide, the young Ottomans. The other will be the young Turks. But the question is that they're all fighting over is, what does it mean to be Ottoman? Like if I said I'm Ottoman, what is my commonality? And who are our people? And that's what really drives these two different groups as we move forward. And so our young Ottomans, as I said, that's our first group. And so the young Ottomans are really influenced by the French Revolution, European-style democratic systems. They want to basically blend Islam and modernism, so Islamic modernism. So they're going to embrace the scientific innovations, things that are coming out during this time period, building on the scientific revolution that happened in Europe. But they're going to retain their strong Islamic beliefs. It's not going to be separate. It's going to be one of the same. And so, like, this is a big deal. They're saying our identity, our Ottoman identity, is in this fact that we are Muslim people, but we can still modernize. It can work together. And again, you're going to see some comparisons as we looked at China as well. Sultan Hamid II will accept this constitution by the people, like very similar to the French Revolution, but then will later suspend it and then go even further to be like an absolute ruler. So it wasn't terribly successful, but we see some movement there. Now the other group is different when we look at this. So the young Ottomans, Islamic modernism. Young Turks, though, is a different group, and they're really going to focus and oppose Hamid II. They really wanted this thing. They wanted Turkish unity. So if they're saying, what does it look like to be Ottoman? It says it looks to be Turkish. And so we see this nationalism building on this commonality of we speak Turkish, we are Turkish, and then what's unique about them, though, is that they are going to be more secular. Secular meaning non-religious, non-Islamic. And so they fight for new things such as universal suffrage, voting, equality, free education, freedom of religion, secularization, again, non-religious influences on the government, secular laws, not based on Islam, women's rights. You can wear westernized clothing, okay? So all these things are what the Young Turks are pushing for. Now, when they go home at the end of the day, are many young Turks Muslim? Absolutely. But they're saying the government itself should basically be, there should be a separation of our religious beliefs from our law codes. And that it should be really strongly Turkish. And so they gained control in 1908, and we're going to see how their influences really are going to be seen when we create the nation of Turkey after it becomes independent, and we'll look at that during World War I. So as you look at this, we're going to see that there's going to be like, who are we? Who are the Ottomans? And we see different people that are trying to keep up with the Europeans and what that looks like in society. So hopefully this was helpful to outline how the Ottomans responded, sometimes not in the best of ways, but we see other groups really pushing for different things and really defining in this kind of new age of nationalism, who are we as Ottomans?